Welcome to Newsbreak, brought to you by We Believe Digital Broadcast Studios. You know, several times a week we try to have a show that deals with the events, the current events, and the things that are going on in our community and sometimes abroad. And today is no different. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi. We're being seen on Facebook, on Roku TV, on YouTube, and on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. Now you can join us, and we'd love to have your participation and share your ideas and concepts. You can join us by calling 800-492-5186. Again, We Believe Digital Broadcast Studio. My co-host today, as always, is Christopher Young. How are you, Chris?
Very good, Mr. Garrett. Glad to be here.
Well, it's good to have you in the studio. So when we tell our audience we're going to bring them breaking news and news that they won't find in other places, that's exactly what we intend to do. As always, though, I want to start this show by reminding our viewers, local and national, about two very important activities, incidents that are going on here in the state of Mississippi. One, I have to go back to the trash collection contract with Mr. Richards. Richards Disposal Service was selected by the administration to be the new provider for the city to pick up garbage in our city. After several attempts and 3 separate RFPs and bids went out, we finally ended up with an African-American firm that had a savings of $1.2 million annually to the city of Jackson. And yet, our city council, which is comprised of 7 members, but 5 of those are African-American in a city that's 85% African-American. And those individuals, 3 of the African Americans plus 2 whites, voted against the award of the contract to an African American firm in a city that's 85% African American. A proposal that gave $1.2 million a year savings in a city where 40% of its residents live below the poverty level. In a city where we are having issues with being able to finance the rebuilding and reconstruct of our infrastructure. Our water plant needs work. In a city where we have less than 150 police officers on the street, when the required number of officers is in excess of 300. In a city where recently we announced that there was going to be an increase in sanitation services, while we refused to accept a $1.2 million savings. Reject the savings, increase the price. You know, there was an old phrase that someone coined years ago, that is something very rotten in Denmark. Granddaddy would have said there's a rat in the wood pile. There's something going on here that just does not add up. And this African-American provider who was picking up garbage in Louisiana, in both New Orleans and Baton Rouge, for the past 40 years, is being denied the award of a contract. And yet, like African Americans traditionally have to do, we have to prove that we're better. We have to run faster. We have to jump higher just to have a chance. You don't start out with equal footing. You're 400 years behind coming into the race. And we are required to run faster, jump higher than any other ethnic group. And Mr. Richards, in his attempt to prove once again that a black company can do this job, decided that he would take the contract and pick up the garbage off the streets of Jackson, which he has done now for the last 3.5 months. In the meantime, our city council says that we didn't tell him to pick up the garbage, so we're not going to pay him. We have city council people that say crazy things like, if a young boy comes and cuts your grass and you didn't tell him to cut it, you ought not pay him. We have other council members that say that if it ain't broke, why fix it? In a city and in a state where African-American businesses, which represents 40% of the population of this state, but yet get less than 2% for contracts for goods and services. Less than 2% of contracts for goods and services from the state of Mississippi, and less than 10% of contracts for goods and services on all of the minority-run elected officials, which I call economic engines, that being the city, Hinds County, the school district, and the airport authority, where over $1 billion flow through the hands of African Americans, and yet we're the poorest black business community in the country. Something wrong with that. Something rotten in Denmark. There's a rat in the wood pile somewhere, and it's all going to be flushed out. Because I believe in the old adage that God don't like ugly, and that in the end of the day, that we will be treated fairly, given equal access and opportunities to pursue the American dream, which is just the pursuit of happiness and economic stability, just to be a full first-class citizens. And the denial of that right now is being orchestrated and carried out by African Americans. Now, I don't intend to be long-winded on this subject, and I apologize to my co-host, but I just got to go on just a bit further. You see, Waste Management had this contract for over 35 years in the city of Jackson, where they were paid $500 million. And there's not one park that I see that has been erected. There's no baseball diamond that they've created in our schools. There's no high-rise buildings. There's nothing that I've seen where they put money back into our community. There are no auxiliary businesses that are benefiting from their presence here, like no black companies selling insurance and selling tires and selling oil and all of the things that go along with an auxiliary economic engine. And yet we deny Richard's disposal the chance to go to work. Now, I'm told after 4 months of providing this service with no pay, that Mr. Richards is now being forced to put his house up just to continue financing this operation. It takes $800,000 a month to run this garbage business. No black man or white man can go extended periods of time without getting paid unless you're deliberately trying to run them out of business and force them into bankruptcy and prove once again that black folk can't do the work. That will be the outcome unless someone intervenes. Some people of goodwill take to the streets and march and elevate this crisis to its highest level. There's a crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. Now, I've taken all of our time on this subject. We're getting ready to go to a commercial break. Just stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The Mississippi Link is an African-American female-owned newspaper with a trusted voice that is highly respected throughout the city, state, and nation. Our motto, keepers of the knowledge for people who speak the truth, since 1993. Link significantly influences the thoughts, attitudes, and buying decisions of its readers. call us at 601-368-8481 for your advertising needs. If you would like to receive a newspaper in the mail each week, our annual subscription is only $52 per year. That is only $1 per week for you to stay informed regarding many stories that you can only get in the Mississippi Link. Sign up today at themississippiLink.com and click on Home Delivery.
Advertise on WeBelieve.global, a brand new digital media platform. Share your brand with our audience on our many global live stream TV broadcasts and over the radio. For more info, visit WeBelieve.global or call 800-492-5186, option 1.
Welcome again to Newsbreak, brought to you by We Believe Digital Broadcast Studio. We're being seen in over 139 countries. You can find us on Facebook, on YouTube, on Roku TV, and on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. We've been seen all over the world. And our purpose here is to bring you the news that you won't find anywhere else as it relates to things that are going on in our community and on a national level. Now, I spent the first segment talking about the garbage collection contract that's going on in Jackson, Mississippi. And I'm reminded that Martin Luther King gave his life fighting for the rights of sanitation workers. And we have this situation in Mississippi that's just unbelievable. It's very painful. And when people see this broadcast, the first thing they want to ask, well, Socrates Garrett must have some part in it. He must have something to gain. What I have to gain is the fact that an African-American firm, wherever they may be, in Mexico or Mississippi, should be given every opportunity to compete. And when they demonstrate they can do the work, they ought to get that work. They ought to have redemption from what has happened so many years in the past. But I'm not going to dwell on that any longer. I'm going to turn to my co-host, but I will say this. There's one other critical issue that is causing great pause in our community, and it's got to do with the welfare dollars, the funds that should be going to the most needed children in our state, and it's not going there. But I'll let our co-host deal with that and anything else that comes to his mind. Chris, it's good to be in the studio with you. Apologize for being long-winded, but I had to get it off my chest.
No, it's real. That's part of living in Jackson. And one of the things you mentioned, it just reminds me that Richards Disposal has proven. They've already proven that they can do the work. And now, starting their 5th month of services, they had no turnover from the previous company. They had to put up over $1 million bond to get to even be able to bid on the contract, and they're out there. You got to search. You really have to search far and wide for complaints at this stage of the game, and that's starting from scratch. Then they had to relocate their staging area due to whining from some quarters. So it's very interesting. And I just make one more comment about that, and then if we could switch over to TANF a bit. At first I thought with this council, like you talked about, with this trio of African American council members, plus the Ashby Foote, and sometimes plus Virgie Lindsay, voting against the contract. At first I thought they really just don't want Richards to have this work. I mean, on the face of it, that's what it looked like. But when you look deeper and really study the votes that were taken, the timing, the cycles of all these RFPs, to me, it's more than the fact that they didn't want Richards to have the job. They want Waste Management to keep it.
Absolutely.
Well, but we don't say that out loud enough. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why would you want this company that's been here 35 years and has been bilking our taxpayers? Why do you want to keep them? There's got to be reasons for that. And so I just say that because I don't hear anyone else saying that.
It's a good point.
I think it's important. On the TANF issue, just in a nutshell, by most reports, $77 million of TANF dollars were turned into a slush fund under the administration of the previous governor, Phil Bryant, for all these personal projects and so forth. Every state gets TANF dollars every year, millions and millions of dollars. The federal government allocates about $16 billion a year for TANF monies to be distributed around the country. And of course, Mississippi is at the top of the list as a debtor state. We're the fourth highest debtor state in the country. For every $1 of Mississippi tax money that's sent to the federal government, we get $2.34 back. In programs like Medicaid, we get well over $3 back on that specific program. But I crunched some numbers just the other day, and I just want to share this with you. The census says that 18.7% of Mississippi lives below the poverty level. That's what the census says. We know here in Jackson, it's got to be at least twice that amount. So just if you can think this through for just a second, Mr. Garrett, based on reporting from 2020 from a nonpartisan think tank, the Budget and Policy Center, in 2020, Mississippi was awarded the TANF block grant for $86 million. By their estimates, they already had $47 million in the TANF bank from previous years. And yet Mississippi has identified 4,767 people in receipt being TANF recipients. So when you crunch that up to the percentage of poor people, less than 1% of this state, less than 1%, 0.86% of Mississippi has been identified as being in need of these dollars in the eyes of the governor, as opposed to the census telling us at least 18.7% live below poverty. So that's another crisis going on here in Mississippi, is that you have this just grossly disproportionate numbers, conflicting numbers. How, if you have 18% living below poverty level, are you only providing services to less than 1% of those?
It's incredible, Chris. Your information and your statistics are very alarming. If we only have 4,000 eligible recipients in the poorest state in the nation,
right.
I mean, can you imagine that? And then I'm told, and I need you to share with us, what happened to the $86 million that was appropriated?
Yeah, it's all sorts of things. It appears, and I admit I rely heavily on the reporting of this Miss Anna Wolf, a crackerjack investigative reporter, works for the Mississippi Today organization, media organization. She's been the one riding herd on these folks. And it appears that the largest single disbursement from the slush fund is $5 million to build a volleyball stadium at University of Southern Miss, where Brett Favre's daughter played volleyball. And so I don't know how you, and the truth is they're not the only university. And so I'm going to be digging deep in an upcoming article for the Mississippi Link newspaper, a black-owned, female-owned paper here in Mississippi that really prides itself on telling the truth about things. Belhaven University received TANF dollars. Belhaven.
Wow.
You know where that's at?
I do.
And MSU, 816,000. Belhaven, 236. Delta State, $563,000. I mean, so it's not just Southern Miss. There's other institutions of this from this board. This institution's a higher learning board that sanctioned these payments, knowing that they're welfare dollars.
And so TANF, what does TANF stand for?
It's temporary assistance for needy families. It's spun out of the old, what's considered the old welfare to work program that came in during the Clinton administration.
And so it's temporary assistance for needy families.
That's right. That's right.
And the dollars were spent to build volleyball stadiums and given to other predominantly white institutions. I noticed you did not name Jackson State or any of the HBCUs.
I did not. They're not on that list, Mr. Garrett. You know, I saw another report where somebody from SuperTalk, SuperTalk Radio?
I do.
It seemed like a haven for the Republican message here in Mississippi. Not that the Republican message in Mississippi needs much of a haven because it's 60% Republican state. But talking about one of the principals up there having their children sent to rehab or something along those lines, being paid for TANF dollars. Now, how can you ever make that work?
You can't. And let me just say to you that Mississippi, while it may be 60% of the folk are registered Republicans, but as was demonstrated in the race for senator by Mike Espy, 90% of Caucasians will vote against an African-American candidate, whether they're Democratic or Republican. And so you can't, in order for an African-American to win, you would have to get 20% of the white vote, and it's never been done. It's never been done, regardless of how they're registered by party.
Oh, just leaves you speechless. It's hard to wrap your brain around that.
We're stuck in a bad place. The state requires new thinking. Now, we're in the Bible Belt, Chris.
Yes.
And yet we have a lot of corruption, because poverty breeds corruption, in my opinion. And what role does the church play?
That is a great. That is another great question. That's the thing that getting your head wrapped around that is that the people that are making the decisions about how the money flows, about who's allowed to generate income and revenue in this state, and who barriers are set up to help or to prevent other people from enjoying a piece of the American dream. All these folks are Christians, and it seems like it's more than just being indifferent to poor people and black people. I believe it's contempt. Now, how can you be Christian and have contempt for any group of people? Black, poor, green, wealthy, no matter what it is, how could you have contempt for any group and call yourself a Christian?
It's difficult to understand. Yeah. Even Jesus spoke to the Samaritans. Yeah. And so it's difficult to understand how we could be in the heart of the Bible Belt and have this polarization, this amount of racism and discrimination in that environment. Now, Chris, tell me a little bit about your water problems in Jackson. It's been headlines. I've seen some headlines regarding that subject.
We do have a phone number for viewers to call for updated information about water giveaways, distribution centers. They're at fire stations on Medgar Evers Boulevard and on Terry Road. And if you can copy down the number, 601-960-2723. Now, during business hours, you call that number and they'll keep you updated as to where the water distribution centers are today and where they plan to be in the coming days. So please write that number down, 601-960-2723. The state and local elected officials have been malfeasant in taking care of the infrastructure for water and sewer here in this state, in this city, this capital city, the most populated city in the state, for decades upon decades. I found one report somewhere where they've been complaining about water in Jackson, Mississippi for over 100 years.
Well, Chris, interesting that our mayor said that he was very insulted when the state issued a boil water notice without talking to him.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they're trying to keep track of it. They do this testing all the time. They know that there's certain pipes are 100 years old around here and decay, and they're trying to stay up on top of it, it seems to me anyway. And they issue these boil water notices to me as evidence that they're doing testing and watching how things are going. Nobody likes it, but they attempt to stay on top of it. And then out of the blue last week, the state declared a boil water notice for Jackson without any consultation with the mayor. So at his press conference on Monday, he obviously barked really loud about that.
Well, I mean, how can you come into a city, into a mayor's city, make a boil water notice without talking to the mayor, who has the responsibility to oversee the water in Jackson? They didn't do that in Flint, Michigan.
Right.
Ultimately, I assume the state might have taken over the water department up there, and I'm not sure if they did. I know they took over the government in Detroit. But, the mayor is absolutely right. It is the most insensitive, rudest thing I've ever heard of. Next, that the state will, the deal is, and I would suggest to the mayor that the state take over the water. There's an idea. If the state wants to come in and issue boil water notices without consultation with the mayor, why don't they just take it over and fix the problem?
Instead of using the TANF funds for a slush fund, they could replace some pipes.
They could replace some pipes in Jackson where the funds were meant to be spent on the black citizens in the state of Mississippi.
Yes, sir.
Chris, we're about out of time, but there were a couple other items I know that you wanted to get to.
Well, I just taken notice of the grocery tax. There's talks going on. There's been talks from legislators for many years about doing something about the grocery tax. And I just learned recently there's only 13 states that have grocery tax. And lo and behold, at 7%, Mississippi is the highest of those states. In Jackson, we have a 1 percentage point added on to that in Jackson, so 8% grocery tax. And it's interesting, they just did a tax cut. They're beginning this year now, that just started July 1, starting to this tax to lower the tax rate in Mississippi, which just baffles me that you would want to mess with a fixed income stream like that. But they keep the grocery tax high, and who is that hurting the most? That's hurting working families. That's hurting retirees. That's hurting elderly. That's hurting poor people. So it's just it's a real conundrum. They want to cut the state tax, which favors the wealthiest among us, but leave the grocery tax. They'll talk about it, but they don't enact anything to change it now for years and years and years.
Well, you've been listening to WeBelieveDigital.com's News Break program with Chris Young and Socrates Garrett. You can find us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Roku TV, and on WeBelieveDigital.com. It's going to take shows like this that are willing to dig deep inside and below and beneath the headlines to bring you the real story as to what's going on throughout this country. Because those things that apply to Jackson, Mississippi also apply to most urban cities that are having trouble just maintaining and taking care of their infrastructure and good water quality. We need some serious help. So if you're out there and you're ready to relocate to Mississippi, we need you to come now. We need to bring some talent in here and some folk in here with visionary leadership that have seen how problems were solved in other places, problems far greater than the ones that we have. Jackson is in a garden spot. I always say that It's akin to the best place you could have a city, ideally located on the Pearl River with the intersection of I-55 and I-20 and 20 and 220. Just ideally situated 200 miles from almost every other city around. And yet we're last in every category that makes a difference. Failed leadership. Until next time, this has been Socrates Garrett and Chris Young. I want you to have a great evening and stay safe. Bye-bye.